It's important to understand that the gap encountered by mathematicians is not a defect in their discipline, but arises whenever we symbolically represent reality. Because symbols are unconstrained by the ordering of the physical world, they can express more possibilities than this world permits. A gap of some sort is thus inevitable. To underscore this important point, let me provide a concrete illustration. Imagine a tribe that performs ritual dances, which involve a dancer jumping across a sacred stick. The dances are carefully choreographed, and the choreographers decide to formalize their instructions to the dancers. In doing so, they discover that an odd number of jumps will always end with the dancer on the far side of the stick, while an even number of jumps will always end with the dancer on the near side of the stick. Thus, although they can tell the dancer to jump twice and land on the far side of the sacred stick, the dancer will be unable to carry this out. What the choreographers have encountered is a gap between what their instructions can express and what the physical world permits. The real numbers and their operations accurately represent the physical world, so a very similar gap is found in mathematics. If we put a negative sign in front of the natural number 1, we're in effect jumping across the sacred stick called 0. If we multiply this result by -1, we're jumping back. We end up with a positive number. The result is the same for the positive sign and multiplication by +1. Thus, mathematicians can specify algebraically that a squared value equals -1, but it's numerically impossible to carry this out. A gap again exists between expression in the symbolic world and performance in the real world. Now comes the crux of the matter I'm addressing. How is this inevitable gap presented? Is it openly acknowledged, or is it kept deceptively hidden? Let's go back to the tribe and see how they might handle their gap. What the choreographers do is place a second stick at right angles to the sacred stick. They then break tradition by inventing a new dance maneuver, 2 diagonal steps that land the dancer on the other side of the sacred stick. This allows the dancers to perform the instruction, but at the cost of violating tradition. However, the choreographers are candid about this, and they admit that the 2-step maneuver is simply an imaginative way to enrich the dances. What they've done is analogous to my suggested response. They have seen a gap, sought completeness by filling it, and avoided deception in doing so. Mathematicians have found a similar solution. They have placed a second stick, which they call the imaginary number line, at right angles to the real number line. Then 2 jumps, first to I, and then to I squared, can be performed to reach -1. This allows them to solve the algebraic expression, but at the cost of violating the reality-based numbers. Unfortunately, this violation is not acknowledged. It is, in fact, actively obscured. To underscore just how far imaginary numbers are removed from reality, let's take another look at this second stick innovation. This represents a quantity, distance, force, time, etc. This does not represent a quantity. The imaginary numbers are a purely formal construct, and the spaces between them are not quantitative. Further, this is true. However, this is neither true nor false. It's meaningless, because imaginary numbers can't be quantitatively compared. The so-called complex plane is therefore a bizarre mix of the real and the formal, and shouldn't actually be called a plane at all. Mathematicians encourage people to see it as a normal plane because this perception strongly supports the standard story. Let me go back to the tribe one more time. I've said that the choreographers were initially open about their non-traditional 2-step maneuver. However, time passes and things change. As generations of choreographers succeed each other, the origin of the 2-step maneuver is lost to memory. Hunters reveal that they have copied this maneuver in the field, and as a result have caught more game. The 2-step is therefore useful. Bolstered by this acceptance, the choreographers redefine a jump to include the two-step, further weakening the ties to tradition. Someone then points out that the jump is just a simple form of the two-step, so the latter is the only dance maneuver that really exists. This last stage effectively removes all traces of the two steps past. In brief, a candid recognition of discontinuity has over time evolved into a deceptive claim of continuity. A roughly parallel process has occurred in the field of mathematics. The true rationale for the complex numbers has been lost through the focus on operations. The usefulness of the so-called complex plane is repeatedly invoked to defend the standard story, even though this usefulness is largely based on a misrepresentation. Emboldened by their successes, mathematicians have broken the essential tie between numbers and the physical world. And because the complex numbers are deemed to be all-inclusive, this historical sequence has been swept from view. In brief, a candid recognition of discontinuity has evolved over time into a deceptive claim of continuity. But okay, so what? Mathematics works just fine. So even if I'm right about the misleading nature of the complex number story, where's the harm? The most serious damage results from the separation of numbers from reality, which has caused much of the discipline to lose touch with the physical universe altogether. Mathematician Reuben Hirsch once asked, quote, "Why do mathematicians believe something so unscientific, so far-fetched, as an independent, immaterial, timeless world of mathematical truth?" Unquote. The current complex number story, which most mathematicians have deeply internalized, is probably one reason for this Platonist delusion. Also damaging is the fact that the complex number story is a sales job, a buffed and burnished marketing effort. As explained, a gap arises naturally between symbols and reality. Filling the gap is unavoidably messy. But rather than acknowledge this messiness, mathematicians present their field as elegant and unblemished. I find it hard to avoid the conclusion that mathematics is a linchpin of the prevailing order, and that a tidy story helps in portraying this order as coherent and permanent. Harm also results from the story's filtering effect. Mathematics students who see that the complex number story is dubious will likely leave the field. Those who embrace it will likely stay. Such gatekeeping concepts, which exist in other fields as well, weed out bold and independent thinkers, while allowing clever conformists to slip through. Given that our world is in ecological peril and must undergo rapid change, we can't afford to foster conventional minds in any discipline, including mathematics. There are other issues as well, although I'll skip the details. The complex numbers are part of a dangerously ethnocentric perspective. The more numbers and number systems we recognize, the more superior our civilization is presumed to be. The wisdom of the so-called primitive cultures is slowly being recognized, but this process is hampered by the Eurocentric orientation of mathematics. Complex numbers may also be implicated in the unwarranted awe expressed by physicist Eugene Wigner in his essay on the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. Wigner finds it miraculous that a consistent abstraction about a well-behaved reality applies broadly to that reality. This is like being amazed that chess principles that apply to the white pieces apply to the black pieces as well. This widely shared bafflement is likely rooted in a mystified mathematics, a mystification that the complex number story has done much to deepen. To wrap up this critical evaluation, let me ask mathematicians a question. Now that the complex number scheme has been firmly established, isn't it time to clean up the misleading story you tell about it? If you want to retain the word number in this connection for convenience and continuity, that's understandable. But if you do so, please insist that the symbol I stands not only for imaginary number, but also for ingenious patch. This would indicate to the world that your discipline has reached a new and welcome level of maturity.